Hello everybody, my name is Judy Niemeyer, and today we're going to do a video on another one of the Stella Maris collections, and the group number is called M003. The name of it's called Checkmate. I don't have a quilt on the wall that actually shows the Checkmate element right here, but I'm sure you'll, with your videos, you probably, if you're looking for it, you're going to find this. So the Checkmate is actually very similar to a Lone Star, and the technique that we use to make this is very much the same as the patterns for several of our other patterns called the Prismatic Star Queen, and I could go on and on and on, and I'm not going to mention anymore, but the process is the same. So what I'm going to do is, there's a lot of cutting and pasting and setting up the strips in the right order for this, and that's the part I really want to review here. And then after we get to that part, then we'll go through how you do the paper piecing. So I'm probably going to break this video into a couple parts, but I think you're going to like it, because it's really going to open your eyes to how we actually do a lot of our Lone Star diamonds, Lone Star quilts. Okay, so we're going to start like I normally do, and I say, if you're using Quiltster, you already have a picture of what your block's going to look like, and it's going to print out a little picture like this. And then what it's going to do is you'll end up with a print sheet, and that print sheet is going to have all of your fabric numbers listed on, how many strips you have to cut for each one of those fabric numbers. And then, since I don't have a color printer that I particularly use, I like to just go and get my fabric and glue swatches onto my sheet here. And that way I have it to always reference, and I don't have to worry about whether or not I can tell the difference between two different light fabrics. Now, if you don't have Quiltster, if you do have Quiltster, then you're also going to have all of your pieces pre-cut and placed in a bag. The other thing you will have on them is a little label with the fabric swatch on that. So I like to actually print two of those sheets. One of them I cut up and I put the labels onto my sheets, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. I won't undo all of them, but basically I cut this information into little strips like that, and then I glue that right onto my fabric, and I use the repositionable glue, because then when I pull it off, it doesn't leave glue all over, and it's really easy to pull off. So all of my strips are already labeled with the fabric number, and I have the correct number of strips cut. Now, I'm not going to put them back in the bag, because we're going to sort them here in a little bit, so I'm just going to move them over. If you guys have quilts, you don't have Quiltster, you do need to realize that your instructions actually tell you how to cut those, and we'll go over that. It's very easy to cut the strips. So let's go ahead and start at the beginning of the pattern, where it tells us how many bags we have to have. And this pattern requires 4 bags, and I have my 4 bags labeled. So I have an M1, and I'm not even going to call them M1 or M2. I'm just going to call them bag 1, bag 2, bag 3, and bag 4. And the reason that M is in front of that is because if you're doing several mixers to build a whole quilt, then you have to know that this belongs to your M group. But we're just going to refer to them as bags 1 through 4 today, and get rid of all of the M letters. Okay. When you read that information and set up your bags, it's also going to tell you what foundation sheets go into each one of these bags. And then it says the associated SP templates, which your SP templates are really your strips that you're the template pieces that you use to cut the strips. Now, all of our booklets also tell you that when you get to your templates, you're better off to just set the templates aside. I always organize my templates and then clip them together, and I organize them by the number that's on them. Most of the templates have either a template number on them or they have a template layout sheet number on them. And I just kind of get them organized so that it's easy to find them. All right. I already cut out my foundation papers. And if you look at the instructions, you're going to find that this pattern came with 2 sheets of your foundation papers. All right. And so when you cut them apart, you can actually stack them when you cut. And when you stack them, what I do is pin the corners. I've also found that I can go in and I can run repositionable glue on the areas of the sheets that are not part of my foundation paper. So I could actually glue around the edges, and I can put that on the very bottom sheet. And then I can put the next sheet on top of it. And one of these days I'll actually do a video. It's actually pretty slick, but you have to have a little bit of a light table or a pretty light room to pull that off. But I will show you in one of the videos how I do that. And then you can cut the sheets together. So both of these sheets are cut together, and I have 2 of those. This one is actually my foundation sheet M1L, and the M1L sheet goes into bag number 1. And so we're just going to go ahead and slip that into bag number 1. And I'm going to work through my instructions. My M2L goes into bag M3. And one of the things I am going to point out to you is sometimes you get confused with what bags everything goes, because you're always going back and forth and having to read. And so what I like to do is, once I get my foundation papers cut, I like to just write a little note on there that tells me what bag it goes into, so that if I have to pull them out of the bag, then I know that I have to put them back into that bag. And it just saves me having to flip back and forth through my instructions to remember what bags they go in. So just write a little note on each paper when you put them back into the bags. So we're going to put this one, this is actually M2L, and M2L goes into M3 bag. So let's go ahead and put that in there. And then we have M1R, and this one goes into my bag 2. And those are the foundation sheets, those number like M2R here. This one, that one was M1R. This is foundation sheet M2R. And this one goes into bag 4. All right, so now that we have our bag numbers, everything in a bag, the next thing we're going to do is go over the chart, the fabric chart. And if you actually look at your the yardage chart that we've given you, I've already put all of my little swatches on there. So if you don't have Quiltster, you still have the ability to set all of this up. However, your yardage chart doesn't tell you how many strips to cut. What it does is just tell you what your yardage is, okay? And one thing I want to point out with your yardage chart, all of our yardage charts give you the actual inches that you have to have when you are cutting the strips out. And then it also gives you, it rounds it up to the nearest 1/8 of a yard. So for instance, all of these strips, I have to cut 2.5 inch strips, which is 5 inches. So in my yardage chart, it does tell me I need 5 inches or 1/4 yard. We don't round up to 1/6 of a yard, because in the fabric industry, when we buy fabric, it seems like everything's cut at 1/8 inch increments. So we just have gotten into the habit of always referring to 1/8 yard or 1/4 yard, 3/8 yard. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't cut a 1/6 of a yard, because that's would be plenty of fabric. So when you're reading our fabric charts, just remember that we always tell you how many inches it is, and then it's going to round it up to the next yardage. Now, if you have something and it tells you you need 9 inches, it's going to tell you you need 1/4 yard. And you want to look at that, because in if I have to make 4 cuts out of that 9-inch strip that I need, I may not, if I pre-wash the fabrics or I cut it, I buy it from a shop and they don't quite get it, it's not quite straight, you might not get you 4 strips out of it. So I like to look at the numbers when it tells me how many inches I need. I like to look at it, and if it's really close to the next yardage, the 1/8 of a yard, sometimes I'll move that yardage up 1/8 of a yard so that I have some play room to work with my fabric. All right. Underneath your fabric chart, you will find your color layout. The color layout for this one is actually fabric layout referenced to the back side of the quilt. So however you set the colors up on this piece, realize that when you look at it on this page, it's going to be a mirror image of what it's actually going to finish up to. And the reason we're giving you that is because when you set up your when we put all of our little fabric swatches on, normally they're put onto the foundation paper, and so that's what you're looking at when you're trying to figure out where your fabrics go to. It tells you to cut 3 small swatches from each of the fabrics in your yardage chart. And the reason why is because we're going to use those swatches to put onto the foundation papers, and one of the swatches is actually used for your yardage chart. So if you already put your swatches here, you're not going to put another one there. You just need 2. All right. So let's go over to the cutting instructions. So they're pretty easy. Basically, the first set of cutting instructions tells us to cut 2 2.5-inch strips from each fabric 1 through 8. So if I come back to my yardage chart, that means that all the way down to here, I have to have 2 strips cut out of each one of those fabrics. So I can really just take all those fabrics and stack them on top of each other and go slice, slice, and I'm done cutting. All right, for those strips. And then it tells you fabric M9 and M10 cut 2 3-inch strips. Now the reason we have to have the 3-inch strips is because the diamonds on the end of our pieces are separated out, and they're a little bit wider than the first 8 diamonds. And then fabric number 11, it tells me to cut 2 4-inch strips, and that's the point of the diamond, so it's going to be a larger strip. So we gave you the different size templates, so just when you go through it, don't just set up everything like I would do without reading instructions and cut 2.5-inch strips from everything. Make sure you read that, because those last 2 strips are bigger strips. Okay, so now what it's going to tell me to do is take all of my strips and I'm going to sort them, and the sorting instructions are very easy in here. Okay, I'm going to move my table, move all my template pieces, and we're going to, I'm not moving the table, I'm sorry, I'm moving the template pieces in my bags. So I'm going to set these aside, and we're going to have to keep our book here because it's going to, I have to follow the instructions. I have all my fabrics in order from 1 on top and number 11, fabric 11's on the very bottom, and there's 2 strips of each fabric. And this is the part of the video that I really want you guys to watch. So I'm gonna move a couple more things because I need a little bit more room. So I'm gonna set all of this stuff aside. And I'm going to slide the sewing machine back. And I can leave my table now. So the very first thing it says is strip group 1. If I look at what's written on my graphic, I have to have 2 strips from number 9. So we're going to find fabric number 9. There's 7, 8, and that's 9. So it's telling me to open these up. And you do need to open these up and make sure your right side of the fabric is up, because the diamonds on these are not reversible. Even if I'm using batiks, I can't just flip it over. So you want to make sure that everything's right side up. And then it tells me I want fabric number 7. And we're going to stack it. And I'm just going to show you and keep these kind of in order this way. So that's fabric number 9. Then we're going to take fabric number 7, which for this quilt happens to be the same color. Okay. And then it tells me I need fabric number 5. And then I need a fabric number 3. I'm just going to kind of overlap these just a little bit so we have more room here. And then the last color I need is fabric number 1. Now it tells me to put together strip group number 2. But before I do that, I need to write down that this is group number 1. And I'm going to write it on each one of these little labels, because I'm going to keep these labels. So each one of them say group 1. And I'm going to stack them together. So we're going to take this and we're going to put them in order. And I'm going to set them aside. Now we're going to do the same thing. So the next one, it tells me I want my fabric M2 on the bottom. Then I have fabric M4. And then I have fabric M6. What I'm doing here is I'm setting up the cutting order. And I'm also setting this up in the sewing order so that I can just pick up each piece as I go with my foundation papers. And then it says number 10. And then number 11. I'm going to write group 2 on this one. And now we're going to take this and we're going to stack these in order and set them aside. So right now we actually have all of our strips set up in the cutting order and the sewing order. So we're going to move to the next set of instructions, and it's going to start telling me how to cut. So the very first thing, we want to start with group 1 again. And it says stack the 3-inch by 42-inch strips cut from fabric M9 facing right side up on right side up. Cut 2 pieces matching the size and shape of each template, M2R and M2L. So now we have to find our templates, and I'm going to flip these over, and there's my M9 fabric right there. Now we're going to find our template pieces, and it's telling me that I have to use template M1R, actually M2R. So I need M2R, and I need M2L. So I'm going to take these, we're going to grab our repositionable glue. Going to put a little bit of glue on the back side of these. And you can see in your picture that you're going to have quite a bit left over. So what I'm going to do is actually take this and put a little bit more glue on this and move it over to the end. That way, if there's any mistakes made, I can come back to that and make sure that I'll still have enough fabric to fix a mistake. Okay, and this one, I'm going to get my iron going, which it is hot, and we're going to press all of these creases in the middle. Now we're going to take this one, set that up like that. We're going to grab a rotary cutter and a ruler, and it's telling me to cut these. So we're going to slice, slice, and I'm going to set this piece aside. And then we're just going to, I'm actually need to start 2 stacks here. So I'm going to move my templates as I'm cutting these. That's going to be stacked there. And then I have another stack here. Okay, the second step, it says stack the 2.5-inch strips from fabrics M7, M5, M3, and M1. The strips are stacked in descending order with 2 each. Fabric M7 on the bottom, which that's the way I have them set up. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take this little strip and move this down. It's still pretty sticky, so okay. I'm going to hit these with an iron in the middle. I'm going to straighten up my strips a little because I'm going to cut all of these at one time. So now it tells me to use template M1R and template M1L. So there's my M1L, and this must be M1R. We're going to put some glue on the back. And then it tells me to slice these. We'll take our leftovers, and we're just going to clip these together. Find my paper clips over here. All right, now it says, the next step it tells me is the template pieces are now stacked in the sewing order. The stacking starts with fabric M9 on the bottom. So we're going to take those M9 pieces, and I'm just going to write on this template M9 group 1. And this one's going to be M9. Okay, and now we're going to put the right pieces, and the right is the letter R is actually printed on the paper. And we're going to stack these, because remember, we had these stacked in order. So we don't have to go through and restack everything. We have 2 of everything. So bagged fabric M1 is supposed to be on the top, which that is my M1. All right, and then we're going to go like this. We're going to grab paper clips. And everything is stacked in the sewing order. And we're going to write on here, it already tells me, that the M1 are the right pieces go into bag M2. And the left pieces are going into bag M1. Okay, so we're going to find our bags. So here's bag M1. And this is bag M2. And actually, I'm going to close my bag because the other day I didn't close my bag and my pieces fell out and went into the garbage. So we're not going to let that happen today during my video. We have everything closed. Okay, so now we're going to set up the other bags, the cutting and stacking for group 2. It tells me to start with the 2-inch strips, and those are M2, 4, 6, and 8. So this is my 10 and 11. And again, I'm going to move all of my little labels for each color. And before I start, in this one, it tells me that fabric number 2 should be on the bottom, which it is. And as I do this, I'm going to press them really quick. So I have fabric number 2 on the bottom, fabric number 8 on the top, and then it tells me I want my template M1 or MR1, which is right here. And then it wants, I need MR2. That's not the right template. We want M1R1, which we have, and then we need ML1. There we go. I read the wrong line. Okay, so now we're going to slice them. Going to set our second group over here, and I'm just going to write on this one so it tells me that oh, we're not done cutting, so we're going to set these aside up here. Then we're going to grab fabric M10, and I'm going to press the center of it, move my label, and this one I have to have template MR2, which I already put the glue on that one, and then it wants ML2. So these are my 3-inch template pieces. I'm just gonna cut along the edge there. We'll set this aside, and then those pieces are actually going to go on the top of those stacks like that. And there's a picture down below that I'm following. And now we're on my the MR3 pieces. This is M11 fabric, and these were actually 4-inch strips. So we want the MR3, and then we want the ML3. Move our little label. So I'm going to slip these back with my group 2. Now I'm going to put my fabrics aside, and these pieces, those are my left pieces, these are my right pieces. Okay, and then what I want to write on those, if I come down, my right pieces go into bag 4, and my left pieces go into bag 3. Okay, and if I actually go through all my stacks, I would find that fabric M11 is on the top, and the very bottom piece is fabric M2, because when we stacked them to start with, we stacked them in the order, the correct sewing order. We're going to clip all these together. And we're going to grab our other bags. This one is bag 4. And this one is bag 3. So now we're going to get into preparing the foundation sheets. So I actually have to get into each one of the bags now, and we're going to put some little swatches on our foundation sheets. And so I'm going to start, it looks like I want to start with bag M1. So we'll just go like this. And I'm at the top of page 3. And what it's telling me is I need to position my papers so it looks exactly like the picture that's in the graphic that's in the pattern. And the colors that I have to use, and I'm going to pull out my colors because these are all stacked in order, and I have all my little swatches pre-cut over here, so I can actually look and tell which color is which. And the very first color I need is fabric M1, which happens to be the brown. And if I look at my foundation sheets, this very bottom row says fabric M1, okay, and it goes all the way across, and there's 4 diamonds in that row. And we're going to grab a different glue pen, and I'm just going to take and put some glue on there, and I'm going to put a little fabric swatch on that row so that when I start paper piecing, I'll know if I'm picking up the wrong fabric or if I stuck something in the wrong place. The next piece is fabric M3, which is this color. So we're going to take this. And I only have to put this on one of my sheets because we're going to paper piece these 2 sheets at the same time. Now we're going to go to fabric M5, which happens to be this color. And remember, all of these fabric numbers are written on your paper. And this fabric is M7, which is a little star. And then my last fabric is M9, which is also a little star. So I can just grab this piece. And then we're going to clip these fabrics right onto that sheet, and we're going to put them back into the bag. Okay, and at this point I'm actually going to switch that around. This. That's my bag 1. Now we're going to grab bag 2, and we're going to do the same thing. Now, this seems kind of tedious, but let me tell you, if you don't do this and you come back a year later to finish these, you won't have any idea what you are doing. So you need to make sure that you glue these little swatches onto your papers. All right, so this one calls for my brown fabric, which is M1, and I can find my diamonds here. This is section 1 and my diamonds, and it tells me fabric M1. And then we're going to be at fabric M2, and that's going to be one of these. Even though you have everything stacked in order, one of the things that happens when we're teaching classes is once they pull those template pieces off, sometimes they have a tendency to flip the fabrics over, and all of a sudden they're pulling off at the bottom of their stack, and they get lost as to what color they're supposed to be using. And this will protect you from that. Now my next color is my little star fabric. My last color is a little star fabric. And now we're going to take these we're going to put them into this bag. take bag 3, and bag 3 starts with, get this, it starts with my points down, and that says fabric M11, and my fabric M11 is on the top of my sheet, which is this piece. And then we have M10, which is the same color. And then we go down to my light color. And then we have some little stars, or M6. And then we have, this is M4. And then my dark print, which is M2. And now we're going to do bag number 4. And this one, if I look at my picture, it's positioned just like that. And we start with this fabric is M11. The fabric underneath it is fabric 10. And then we have our light fabric. And under our light fabric, we have our beige stars. And then we have our gold. And then we have some brown. Okay, so that's probably the most important part. Well, that's one of the important parts of this pattern. It is actually, the next step we do is actually the paper piecing. And that's where you're going to see why we did all of this. And it is really fun. So if you're watching this video and you're thinking, man, I have one of those prismatic stars sitting in my stash that I've never made. I just gave you all the instructions basically, other than the numbers are going to be different, but the process of sorting the colors is very much the same as what we're doing here. All right, so we're going to actually start the paper piecing. It looks like we're using unit M2R. So I believe this is my M2R. That way we can follow the instructions. And we need rotary cutter, our fold template, add a quarter ruler, my glue pen. We probably don't need a pencil for this step. And my scissors. And then all we need is a book. And we have to keep the iron hot. So we're going to rearrange my sewing machine here. And I'm going to ask my assistant to check the camera to make sure we can see. If I got this back in the right place. Looks like we're good. All right, we're going to set this down to the side. And I really am not even going to leave my book on here because I know how to do this by heart. So I'm going to set the book down. We're going to get rid of the bag. We're going to open up our stash, my fabrics, pull the paper clips off. We're going to stack our fabric right at the top of our table. And we're going to find section 1 on the foundation papers, which is fabric number 11. So we're going to take the first 2 pieces off of our stack. We're going to remove our template and just go ahead and set the templates aside someplace, because if you do make a mistake, and you can make a mistake all the way on, you can make it later on by simply cutting in the wrong spot, you have the templates to go cut a new piece, and you actually have enough fabric to replace that whole template sheet. So you want to keep those. Now we're going to take our piece and we're going to flip it wrong side up, and we do need our repositionable glue, and we're going to take our first sheet and we're going to run the glue across the bottom of section 1, and I'm going to put the fabric right under there. So I'm going to put my ruler here right on the dashed line, and I have to make sure I have fabric up past that dashed line where I set that ruler. So I have fabric underneath here. So we're going to take the next piece and match it up the same way. And we're going to slip that in place. Done with the glue. Now we're going to take our fold template, and I use my 18-inch add a quarter, and then I cut a template, fold template that's 18 inches long as well, and it's about 3 inches wide. So it works really, really good. This one's actually 3.5 inches wide. So we're going to pick up the first piece, and I'm going to place this fold template on line 1, and it tells me line 1, line 1, line 1, line 1. So you can't put it, if you're reading, you're not going to put it in the wrong place. Just put it on the solid line, mark line 1, and you're going to fold it back. You're going to place your fold template on there, and you're going to trim a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then you're just going to set it up here. You're going to grab your next piece, fold back, and trim, and stack. Now we're going to find, and just go ahead and stack those templates. They're all have that repositionable, so they're going to glue to each other, which is just fine. This piece, we don't flip it over. This is right side up. And what we're going to do is place and match the raw edges. And we want to make sure that we have a little bit of fabric on this side of the paper and a little bit of fabric on that side of the paper. So see my template, or the fabric piece, is cut the same angle as the paper, because the paper's folded back, and that angle has to match the paper when it's folded back. Otherwise you'll put it on backwards. We're going to take the next piece of fabric, lay it on top of this template, pick up the foundation paper, and match the raw edges. And we're going to double check and see I have about a 1/2 inch of fabric there and about a 1/2 inch of fabric there, showing on both sides of paper. This side I have to fold that paper back to see where that angle is setting. Now we're going to take our glue pen and we're going to lift up the top piece of fabric in the seam allowance, and we're going to run glue along that. We're going to set our stitch length a little bit smaller than what we normally set them, because we're going to be doing a lot of second cutting process when we start separating all the diamond. So I'm actually going to go down to about a 1.7 on my machine, and then we're going to pick up the foundation paper, and the piece just just stays on because I glued those edges. And I'm going to start sewing, and I'm going to sew on line 1. The straighter you sew, the happier you're going to be when you start matching your points. So sew straight. Then we're going to pick up the next piece, and we're going to follow right through with it. We're going to cut them apart, and I'm just going to double check, make sure that everything's covering the way it's supposed to cover, and then we're going to go to the iron. And I know you guys are probably looking at that thinking, well, why does she have 2 colors next to each other? Well, it's because of the way I colored my pieces. The quilt that I'm making out of these is actually shaded from the lightest color to the darkest, and I wanted my star, the first couple points on my star, to be the same color. So we're going to press, and you're going to press into that seam, and make sure you open that, press that really tight. There we go. Now we're going to flip it over. And we're going to place this on line 2. So we have our fold template on line 2. We're going to crease the paper. And we're going to cut. And the next piece of fabric that we're actually adding on is my white fabric, which I have it. And since we're, whoops, I wasn't going to throw those templates away. So I'm just going to take my fabric, put it right here. I'm going to lift this up and position it onto my next strip. Okay. Then we're going to fold this one, fold templates on line 2, place the outer quarter ruler, trim, add your next piece of fabric underneath it, and match the raw edges. I'm going to bring that forward to me, grab my glue pen, and we're going to sew on line 2. Pick up the next one. Just double check and make sure it's covering your paper before you go to the iron. We're going to pause the video for a few minutes, and I'm going to finish sewing these papers, and then I'm going to sew some of the others, get them ready. Then we're going to come back and show you the finished pieces, and I'm going to show you how to do the cutting and how to assemble the units. So I'll be back in a bit. Okay, we're back. I have one of my pieces completed, and I just wanted you to see what that's going to look like. I actually have two of them completed, but we're only going to work with one right now. So I have all my colors in the order that I wanted. Now I'm going to come over here, and I need to look at my papers, and there's some TRP lines on there. So the first thing we're going to do is sew those TRP lines. And now I'm actually going to come in and do a little bit of cutting with the threads and kind of clean off the threads a little bit. We're going to do it on the top and the bottom. Okay. So this is what we call the part 2 cutting. And I don't know if I referred to that in these instructions, but I do know that I do refer to that in some of our instructions. So after we get all of the strip piecing done, then we have to come in and do the cutting on each individual pieces, okay? Each individual strip set, and then we're going to make sure we cut our smart corners. So we sewed the TRP lines, and then I'm just going to take my ruler. I'm going to cut right on that line. Now, if you have a situation where sometimes after you start sewing, your pieces will kind of move and shift, and they don't really line up very straight with your ruler, just adjust the paper a little bit, pieces to the size of the, because once you remove that paper, then the fabric's going to lay the way it's supposed to. And the only reason why that happens is because in the process of pressing with the steam over and over, sometimes it'll shrink the fabric just a little bit. But it's not, or not the fabric, but the paper. But the fabric's going to be fine. So just go ahead and cut right along the edge of your paper. And then we're going to cut on the next one. These units actually don't have cut lines on them, and now that I'm looking at them, I know why, and it's because the angle of these pieces is not perpendicular to each other, and so Bradley, when he designed them, had to set them away from one another so that you could actually get that cut, because we couldn't scoot them. It's not a straight cut line in between each one. Let's pause for a second. Okay, I have all 4 of the strips cut. Now we're going to cut off the end pieces. And then we're going to cut the smart corners. Got to cut along the bottom. And I'm going to set the rest of them aside. That's what it's going to look like when you're done. Now I do want to show you something. You're going to have some of these pieces that are going to, your little fabric swatches are going to show up on. You need to pull those fabric swatches off. And the reason why is because when we start assembling our star, those fabric swatches get sewn into the star sometimes. So you need to just pull those off. You don't need them anymore. And I'm going to go ahead and get everything else ready, and then I'm going to show you how to assemble these. So we're going to pause again for a little bit. The other thing I'm going to do is I actually made a cutting mistake with one of my pieces, and I'm going to show you how I fix it. So there's going to be a little short little part here that's going to show you how to fix the part that I cut. And it was because when I was trimming something off, one of the fabric pieces on my point was pressed and ironed down, so when I cut it off. So I'm going to go over that with you shortly. Okay, this is the piece that I told you that I clipped off the end because it was folded. So let's go ahead and show you how to fix this. It actually happens to be number 1, which means that in reality, in most paper pieces, you know, I would have to just start over with a new piece or pull all of the seams out. On these strips, I can actually cheat a little bit, and I'm going to show you how I do that. So I'm going to take, and I have my tape here, and this is a paper tape. It's called Next Care. It's 3M. I don't know if you can see it in the camera. We'll zoom in on it. And maybe I'll even have Judelle, we'll just list it on there as well. But I'm going to take that tape and I'm going to place it over line 1. And the thing that's kind of cool is I can see through it. Now that I have that on there, I can come back over to this side and I can hold on to the paper, and all I have to do is just rip the fabric loose. Okay, now I'm going to just take this tape and I'm going to go ahead and cut the sticky stuff off around the edge of it so it doesn't keep sticking. And then I have to pick out this seam here. So we're just going to take the stitches and break the stitches. Okay. So, can you zoom in? I'm going to move this. So if you look, there's a little tail that's sitting right here. Okay. I'm going to actually take and I'm going to press this back, and then we're going to fold on line 1. And I'm going to lay this piece in, and I pre-cut this. So it actually needs to go along this side. There we go. That's right side up. And so now I took my piece of scrap fabric and I have it underneath this. So I'm going to lift this up, and we're going to go sew, and we're going to sew on line 1. All right. Now What that's going to do is it's going to take that seam and press that seam in the wrong direction, and I need the seam to go back this way. So I'm going to trim this before I do anything else. So let's iron it. And now we're going to trim it to the right size. This time we're not going to let the tip of it fold back. Okay. Now that I have that on, we're going to go back and we're going to remove this tape. And I'm going to tear it because it is a paper tape, and I can tear that right along that stitch line. I'll pull the point of that paper off. There we go. Now I'm going to go back to my ironing board, and I'm going to repress that seam to the other direction. And I'm going to clean off the seam along the edge there. And then I can actually take this, and if I want to keep that paper on it, we can just take and put a little bit more tape on it. And now our piece is all fixed, and that paper will come off in the end. So you can make mistakes and you can fix them. Just don't worry about them. It's no different than wrecking your car and taking it in and getting the fender fixed on it. Everything is fixable. All right. We're going to pause for a few minutes and get set up for another demonstration. Okay, I am going to show you guys how I do all of my paper piecing. And I've got two different units here, and I'm actually going to do both of these units at the same time. Now, I can do a queen size quilt and stack all my fabric strips up this high, put them on the table, stack all my papers in the order, match the papers up with the strips, and just run the whole quilt through. And on a queen size quilt, I can actually do the paper piecing for a queen size prismatic star in a couple hours. It really doesn't take me very long. And so I'm just going to show you guys how I do this. So we've actually sorted all of the fabrics for this group. We've sorted all the fabrics for this group. Okay, which means we'd have to pick up the fabrics from this and pick up the fabrics from this. Well, what I like to do, and this is where your swatches really come in nice, is I like to actually stack all of these groups together, and then I will take and we will sew these just like this. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to start with my ML, and I like to work with, if I have angled paper, I like to make sure I do all of the right side units together and then all the left side, because otherwise I end up mixing up the angles of the fabric. So as I'm looking at this, I can see that the very first piece I add on to in my stack is going to be my ML1 fabric, and then I'm going to add the M11 fabrics. So I'm going to stack my papers or my fabrics in that order. The very last ones I'm going to add on is fabric M2 and fabric M1. So let's see, this is section 1, and oh, I have to flip this like that, because this is section 1 and this is section 1. So I said that wrong. The first piece is going to be M1 over here and M11. Okay, so my last piece that I'm going to sew on this strip set is going to be M2, and this one's going to be M9. which is the order I have this. So I'm going to flip my pieces over like this. And I'm going to take fabric M2, and then I'm going to put fabric M9 on top of it. Then I'm going to take, and I'm going to remove the template. I don't need that on there. Then I'm going to grab my fabric for section 5, and then I'm going to take this one, stack it here, and we just keep working across. Let's get rid of that template piece. Oh yeah, because this piece has one less. So I need to redo this just a little bit. Actually I don't. I'm good with it. So this is going to go here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the very first piece on, because this has one more piece, so I do have to restack these a little bit because this is my section 1. So let's redo this. So I need to do section 9. Then I have to come over here and do section 5, which is actually this piece, and then I put this one on. Then we're going to do section 4, and over here I do this one as section 4, which is fabric. There we go. And then we're going to come down, because I did this one and this one, this and this. And now this one we're going to set aside because we want the white. And then we're going to put this one on, because what I'm doing is I'm going across like this. This piece here, it's going to get set aside for a second. This one goes here, and then this. And then we're going to set this one here, here, and here. So we're going to double check that. And so this is my section. This is my first 2 colors on, and then we're going to put these 2 colors on. Then we move back over to this sheet. We move to this sheet, which do this color, and we have this one, and then that one, that, and that's the last piece. All right, so now then the next thing I have to do is I have to number my papers, and we're going to grab a pencil, and let's see, where's my pencils? They're in here. Oh, bad. There we go. So this is going to be number 1 paper, and I'm going to label that on the back and somewhere on the front too, and I just usually circle. This is my number 2, and then we're going to, this is number 3, and this one's number 4, and 4. I did get it on both places. Okay, the reason why I have to number my papers is if I had 48 sheets here, I have to keep those 48 sheets in the same exact order all the time. I always have to start with number 1 and finish with 48, because my fabrics are always stacked in that order as well as I pick up each sheet. So the first thing we're going to do now is we're going to take our first 2 fabrics, and we're going to glue them onto the back side of paper number 1. We're going to use our repositionable glue. And remember, you're going to have that dashed line there. You have to make sure that your fabric goes past that dashed line. Then we flip this one over, wrong side up. And we put that one on. Now we're going to pick this one up, put it wrong side up. We put this piece on, and then we pick this fabric up, and we're on paper number 4. And wrong side up. So the next step we have is we have to grab our fold template. We're going to pick up paper number 4, and we're going to place this on line 1. And then we're going to trim. And then we just set it aside because that's paper number 4. Then we're going to do paper number 3. Put it on line 1. And we're going to stack that on number 4. Then we have paper number 2. Stack that on number there. And now we're on paper number 1. We're going to stack that on top. So when you start doing this, it is fun. Now we have paper number 1 on the top, and this fabric goes, oops, both of them want to come with me, goes under paper number 1. And the first time you do this, it's not a bad idea to open it up and look. There's my fabric. And since I'm doing 2 of them the same, then I know that the next one's going in the right order as well. So we're going to put that one here. Then we're going to take this one. And we know that that's the right color because we have to have 2 of each color. Then we pick up this piece. We're just going to open it up. Yep, the color's correct. And we put these on. If I'm doing 48 of them, I'm going to have all 48 stacked. Then I'm going to go through and do all my gluing, glue all the raw edges together. All right. So I'm going to quickly sew these, and then I'm going to show you the step 2 part of what we're doing. We're going to open it up, and we should have the largest number is the first piece you're going to run through your machine because it's on top. So I have number 4. And I'm just going to, if I have a thread cutter, and I'm going to cut in between each one of these and then place that down. Then we're going to grab the next piece. That's number 3. paper number 2. Paper number 1. Now we're going to go to the iron. And as you do your ironing, you're going to you start with paper number 1, then you're going to stack number 2 on top of it. Then we stack number 3. And now we stack paper number 4. Now we come back and we have our paper number 4. We're going to place on fold template on line 2. Trim with our add a quarter ruler. And then we set it aside, and that starts the bottom of the stack. Then we do paper number 3. And the reason you want to have these numbered is because if you have to leave this in the middle of while you're doing it, you need to be able to come back and know exactly where you're at when you stopped. The other nice thing about it is if you have other people helping you, they can pick up and start right where you left off. That's paper number 2. And this is paper number 1. Okay, so now we're going to grab our next piece of fabric, and I'm going to open it up and just double check and it's the right color. So we're going to slip this under, and that's supposed to go like that. I can see I stacked some of these in the wrong direction. That needs to go like that when I was restacking them. So now we're going to grab this piece. This is right side up, and that's going to go under paper number 2. This goes under number 3, and just to check, just look at your paper and it is the right color. That's where those swatches really come in handy, is when you're trying to do the whole series at one time instead of one set of colors at one time. So I can actually run several sheets through with different colors on by doing this. All right, I'm not going to make you guys watch my stacking, but the reality is I am over halfway done with the paper piecing. So we're going to pause for a little bit. We'll be back in a second. Okay, I'm going to show you that we have all of our strip piecing done. And I've cut a couple strips off so I can show you how to join these, but we have all the strip piecing done. And then after you get the strip piecing done, you're going to flip them over. You're going to look for the ones that have the TRP lines. Now, not all of these units have TRP lines, so what you only have to just look for the ones that have it. Sew those before you start trimming them apart. I showed you how to trim them on the last ones. And we're going to just set these aside. And I'm going to show you what you have. So I cut one of each unit group. So these are my L's. And these are the right pieces. So that's basically the way my star is going to come together once I get the seams done. So when we designed these, we designed the seam allowances so that when you sew this piece and this piece on, the seams are actually opposing seams. And even though we're doing an X seam, which means we have to cross an intersection at an angle, 45-degree angle, they're still going to press down a lot better for us. So we actually, that's why we started with fabric 1 on some of the sheets and fabric number 11 on some of the other sheets. The very, on one of these units, we have a place, and it's actually on M2L. It actually tells us that we want to do a repress seam on that particular piece. So when I pull the foundation papers off, the first thing I'm going to do is repress that seam. And what that'll do is it'll give me an opposing seams where when these two pieces will match, that'll be an opposing seam and they'll fit together really nice. So we're going to remove all the paper off of these. The only one that's going to be hard to remove is the first section, because that's the one where you have that repositionable glue. Everything else, you're just going to hold on to right at the edge of the fabric on the seam line and start tearing. You don't want to tear so hard. You just got to hold that thread. And remember, I had you reset your stitch length a little bit smaller for these pieces. And the reason why is to avoid the first 1/8 of an inch of each one of these pieces, the stitches from backing out. So this piece is my repress, so I'm actually going to go do that right now, otherwise I'll forget. So I don't know if you can see this very well because it's such light fabric, but these seams are going that direction, and I repress that seam to that direction. And I'm going to actually clip off this little dog ear right here, there. And then we're going to remove the papers. Start with the very last section, and then come back to section 1. And I actually started on section 1, so we're just going to, this is my L group. When you get to the TRP lines, you're going to have to tear around that little stitch. Okay, so now all you're going to join on this is just, you're going to join these two and these two. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to flip the pieces over, and I'm going to grab my rotary cutter, and I'm going to just flip back each one of the seams, and I'm going to cut that dog ear off. And what this does is it takes the bulk out of these seams when we come back to press them, and they just sew together a lot nicer. So we're going to take the bulk out of that, and we're going to do the same thing with this one. Rid of all those little dog ears on those pieces, and we're going to go over and do the same on these. Okay, so we're going to take our first two pieces and we're going to lay them right on top of each other. We're going to match You're going to match the smart corner on this end, and then you're going to match the smart corner over here. Let's go ahead and get this in the garbage. Now I'm going to grab my glue pen, and the first thing I'm going to do is glue that end and match it up. All right, so there's my first end. Then we're going to take this one and we're going to go right around that little corner. And that smart corner is going to match up on this and along that angle as well. And that's all you're going to glue on that piece. Then we're going to do the same thing here. Okay, so now what I like to do is just pick up the inside. Don't glue where the pieces have to match. You're just going to put just a little bit of glue on each one of the diamonds in the middle. And then just touch those and press those together. Okay. We're going to grab a couple little scrap pieces of paper out of the garbage. And I'm going to start stitching. And I'm going to increase my stitch length now to about a 2. And we're going to take this piece and I'm going to start sewing, and I'm going to come down and sew all the way to the end. And before I get to the end, I'm going to slip this little piece of paper under it, and I'm going to come right down on my point there. As I sew, I'm going to fold back my seams here, and I'm going to fold that back where the seam is, and I'm going to make sure that all of my pieces are matching. And actually, I can do that right here, I think, and then I'll do it at the machine. So because I have opposing seams, I can actually fold this back and tuck those fabrics together, or the seams together, and put a little bit of glue right there. I just have to pull them back just a little bit. And you only want to fold it back 1/4 of an inch. If you get it folded back too far, then it won't match. So it has to be at 1/4 of an inch. And I got that tucked in. Okay. We're going to do the very first one as well. Okay, I normally do those when I'm sewing. I just thought it might be a little easier to show you kind of what I'm doing. Now we're going to lift the pressure foot. We're going to start sewing, needle down, and then I can lift the pressure foot and line it up with my 1/4 inch. There we go. And now we're going to sew down. And right before I get to the end, I'm going to place that under that tip so that my machine doesn't move the fabric. So right off of the tip. Then we're going to open it up, and we have pretty good matches there. One of them's off a little bit. That one's a good match. good match. And this one's off just a little bit. It's close enough for me though. So we're going to leave it. And we're going to get a little bit too much glue on that point. And I'm going to just set that right there. And we're going to sew the other piece. Okay. So we're going to start sewing on our paper. And then I'm going to place this point and line that point on this one because I'm starting where that little point is. I'm going to line it up with my needle and then I'm going to start sewing. Okay, so these, I'm going to show you how I match these seams. So I'm going to put it in, I'm going to guess where my 1/4 inch is. Then I'm going to fold that back, put just a touch of glue right there. And where I think my 1/4 inch is, I'm going to actually crease my fabric so I know exactly where to hit that with the needle. And then I'm going to sew right where that crease is. Then we're going to set the next one, put a little bit of glue there. And I'm going to tuck those two seams together. And they're going straight. Just right along here, you'll see that they're straight with each other. And I'm right about 1/4 inch, so I'm going to move that over just a little bit. It needs to be adjusted up. There we go. This is all bias fabric that you're sewing along the edge, and so you're going to have to lift your pressure foot on occasion to make sure that that doesn't pucker, the fabric doesn't bundle. And I'm just going to take my seam ripper, because I let go of that, and double check where that 1/4 inch is. Okay, now we're going to set the next 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that one's falling right into place. So crease the fabric. Whoops, I'm going to use the tip of my seam ripper for a stiletto here, and I put right at the point where I'm supposed to hit with the needle, and there we go. Then we'll do the next one, and put a little bit of glue there, tuck those fabrics seams together, crease it, and then I'm going to put my seam ripper right where I'm supposed to hit it with the needle. And on this one I don't have a really sharp point, so I can just sew right off the end. Okay. And then we're going to check our seams and see if we got matches. A perfect match, a perfect match, a perfect match, and a perfect match. That's why I like to set those seams when I'm sewing, because it's a little bit easier and the fabric doesn't move. So these pieces go like this, and we're going to go to the very last page and of your instructions, which is page 4, and the last graphic, it tells you that the left side block is going to be pressed to this direction, which that's what I have it finger pressed to that direction. And this block, the right block, is actually going to be pressed to this direction. So we're going to take those to our iron. And that one little seam that I said didn't match, it's only off like about a 32nd of an inch. That's why I said it's good enough for me. All right, that's the way those go together. We're not going to do any more sewing on these because these are assembled and put onto the quilt, or they go together when we actually assemble the quilt. At the bottom, the paragraph says what's next. Well, if you're working with round 4, your next step is to put on a border, and the border that you have to choose from is the F group borders. And there's going to be a lot of I think we have 3 or 4 different border options for you to choose from. And that's the end of our demonstration. So we'll see you another day.